Hello and welcome. This is Michael Beach, and you are dialed into the What Are You Doing podcast. This is the show for thought leaders who are investing in the next generation of leadership for their organization. This is also the show for emerging leaders who want to become that next generation of great leaders. If every one of us tries to capture all of the untapped potential in ourselves and in everyone around us, we're going to make a difference in our world. All of us at Michael Beach Coaching and Consulting are excited to be able to bring you another podcast episode today. I'm especially excited today to have the opportunity to introduce you to today's special guest, an extraordinary and highly sought after business and executive development coach from British Columbia in Canada, Kerry Brown. Kerry has over 25 years of experience working with CEOs and their teams in areas of leadership and team development, performance management, and strategic planning. And Kerry works internationally as well as nationally up there in Canada. Kerry is the CEO and co-founder of Success Biz Coach, a coaching, consulting, and training firm, and also Leadership Development Academy, a training and leadership development firm. Kerry, I've been looking forward to today's conversation for a long time. And now, at long last, our episode has arrived. It's such a pleasure to have you here today to talk to our listeners about your unique leadership journey. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
It's absolutely great to have you here with us today, Kerry, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So let's get started. Kerry, I know that your organization has a leadership mastery program that you're getting some tremendous results with. Could you tell me and our listeners a little bit about that exciting program?
Yeah, I'm so excited about this because as you said, we are getting a lot of traction. And what we really do is we focus on 10 key areas of mastery. And, leadership isn't, people just don't arrive at a position and get a title and all of a sudden they have the skill set to be leaders. Often people are moved within an organization because they're good at something, but they've never actually led people. So we've identified these 10 key areas of time mastery, ego mastery, shared experience mastery, which is not telling people what to do, but sharing experiences. Understanding how giving back to community is an example to set for others in the organization. Innovation mastery, proactive health, relationship, passion mastery, 100% responsibility mastery, and emotional mastery. And we work one-on-one or in groups, depending upon what the organization's need is, to help them really hone these skills.
Sounds fantastic. Kerry, I'm really interested in music, and I like to ask my guests about their favorite musical performers. Do you have a favorite, Kerry?
Oh, that's interesting, Michael, because I knew you were going to ask this question because you ask all your your guests this question. And, I really actually love music. I actually love to move to music. I say that the music that I really resonate with is Neil Young's Harvest Moon. That particular song is one of my favorites. And actually, I'm especially fond of it when my husband plays it on his beautiful Martin guitar. Then I couldn't not answer this question without saying I love to dance to disco because that was my era and it's been really good for my mental health this last year.
Awesome. Well, that's terrific. Kerry, what's the best business or leadership book that you've ever read?
Well, there are so many of them and, every year, of course, tons of them get recommended, but I look back and I say, what was that first real leadership book for me? And that would be Think and Grow Rich. And so in addition to, that, which now is a very yellowed copy of it, I have many other things. And right now I'm consuming anything by Patrick Lencioni because while he works a lot with teams, it really is there's a lot of leadership lessons in them as well. So Think and Grow Rich is my number one all-time favorite.
An old classic. And like you, am a fan of Patrick Lencioni. Very, very amazing work that gentleman has done. At what point along the line did you get interested in leadership? How did you get involved in developing leaders?
Well, it was interesting because initially my original coach training was in personal and business coaching. But of course, when you're doing that and you're attracting people who are in leadership roles, I really started noticing that, some people had the skills and some people didn't. And what was that about? And I think naturally I gravitated to it because a young person, my mother used to say she'd look out the window of our house and see me, and I'd be kind of leading the pack of kids. So naturally, personally, I was drawn to it as a curiosity because, why was that something that naturally sort of came in me? And then over the years, of course, I've done a lot of learning and observation because some of the skills I think that make good leaders are some of the ones that are obvious and some of them the ones aren't. Like that list I told you that's in our mastery program. Some of those things wouldn't be things that people would say would be, overt leadership skills. But I've realized over time those are really critical.
Wonderful. I have to imagine, Kerry, that along the way, someone probably made a big impression upon you as a mentor, or perhaps they made a big investment in you. Can you let us know what those investments or contributions might have been and how those people helped you along the way?
Yes. In fact, I had two early on and one more recently. And I think that there was a bit of a lesson in even that for me is that we always have to be on the lookout for people who are game changers for us. Mm-hmm. If I'd been more aware of that, even when I was younger, I would have had more. Having said that, two early on one of them was Peter Thomas, who was the founding partner and chairman of Century 21 Real Estate Canada. He actually brought Century 21 to Canada. I was a brand new real estate agent at the time. He identified me. And his partner, Gary Charlwood, who currently owns Century 21 Canada, and he's also the CEO of Charlwood Pacific Group, and people would know him also as the founder and executive chairman of Unigob Travel International. So those were early on for me. I observed them. And then my more recent one is Dr. Nancy McKay, who is the founder of McKay CEO Forums. And she's been an incredible mentor to me, leadership mentor.
Fantastic. How nice that you've had exposure to these wonderful leaders. It makes such a difference for us when somebody takes an interest in us and helps us by taking us under their wing. Can you tell our listeners about what you're doing to raise the level of your leadership game these days? What are you working on now, Kerry?
Well, I have always believed in Tony Robbins' acronym, which is constant and never-ending improvement, which means I continually look to grow my skill at coaching my clients in how to become the best leader that they can be. And so each year I set a goal of at least 2 or 3 areas of learning. Currently, I'm enrolled in the 5 Behaviors of a Cohesive Team Facilitator Accreditation Program. That's just upping my skill at being able to develop those skills in others. I'm doing another accreditation in leadership coaching, and I'm going to be doing some courses in diversity sensitivity this year so that I can coach my clients on diversity inclusion, and that I may be a better coach also to a more diverse group of clients, especially Indigenous leaders.
Well, that sounds terrific. Good for you for continuing to fill up the tank. I just love the fact that you're doing that. Kerry, you mentioned an interest in ego mastery. I'm curious, why do you feel this is so important, and how do you see it tying into leadership?
Well, Michael, after coaching leaders for so many years, I realized that mastering your ego is such a critical leadership skill because without it, I saw so many of my clients making bad decisions, reacting versus responding. And I call that that isn't just a semantic distinction in there, but really responding appropriately in the moment. I saw them playing the blame game, sitting in judgment or justifying their actions. And at the end, it all affects our business and our personal relationships. And it was one of those pieces that just kept showing up over and over and over again. And really mastery comes when, as a leader, you're able to identify when your ego is negatively triggered and you're emotionally what we call below the line, where we sit in judgment, where we catastrophize, where we justify our bad behavior. And we cannot make good decisions when we're below the line. Mm-hmm. And once they're able to identify that that's where they are, and then develop the skills to get out of there, because we're all going to end up there. Something's going to happen and we find ourselves below the line. But it's really the mastery is to say, okay, here's where I am. Mm-hmm. This is when I should not be sending out that email. This is when I shouldn't be calling an all hands meeting and rant and rave, or, push the pressure that they might be feeling on somebody else. So to have that skill to be able to quickly identify that and then get themselves above the line where they can use good judgment, critical thinking skills, engage all of those emotional intelligence pieces that are in place. I think it's a really key piece for leadership.
Oh, I agree with you completely. I hadn't really ever heard anyone talk about ego mastery before. It's fascinating, and everything you just said resonated with me, Kerry. I have seen other leaders make those bad decisions you were talking about and respond poorly to an opportunity or a challenge, get into the wrong mindset and the wrong behavior. And I think you just put on a nice clinic for our listeners today about ego mastery and why it's so important. Kerry, I love to give great coaches like yourself the opportunity to put on a 60-second workshop for our listeners. Do you have a 60-second leadership lesson you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yes, Michael, I do. And I have many of them, but this is, I think, the most important one, I would say, which is work more on yourself than those you lead. You have to go first and be an example of the skills that you want to develop in others. Develop that mastery in those 10 areas, those 10 competencies I talked about. And what I want to share with your leaders, your listeners, who are leaders or emerging leaders, is that this isn't a one-time event. Mm-hmm. It's going to take constant learning, practicing and honing those skills. You're going to mess up from time to time, and that's okay. But if your listeners truly care about the impact they can make in the world with the work they do, whatever their business happens to be, and an impact on those they lead, and they have a hunger to develop those skills, then they will, stay the course when they mess up. And that's a great opportunity to show their own vulnerability. Mm-hmm. That they're human, and it empowers others that they lead to do exactly the same thing, to fess up when they make a mistake, when they need help, when they don't have answers. That old notion, Michael, of that if you show vulnerability, it's weakness, is so outdated in today's work environment. In fact, I believe it's an act of courage to show vulnerability. And when leaders model that behavior, it empowers others to do the same. So for your listeners, I'd like them to think about, imagine teams where egos are parked, where everyone's focused on that collective goal for the good of the organization, where everyone has mastered their egos, where they're above the line, where there's nobody sort of jockeying, there's no political, stuff that's happening over the water cooler. How much more could get done in organizations, and how much more engaged everyone would be? But it starts with the leader first.
What a tremendous lesson, Kerry. Thank you for sharing that with our listeners. Here's what I took away from your answer. Don't wait for the cavalry, because the cavalry is not coming. You are the cavalry, and you have to help yourself, and you have to help your teammates to achieve the greatest outcomes. What a fantastic lesson. How much of a value should an aspiring leader place upon emotional intelligence? when they're recruiting or developing strong leaders to their organization?
Well, Michael, after coaching leaders for 25 years and personally having made so many mistakes that I attributed to my lack of awareness or development of emotional intelligence, I believe that it's an absolutely critical piece to success for leaders today. They go really hand in hand. And, one of the things that I want leaders to understand is that people can be book smart. They can have those hard skills. They can really be good at something. But what really will determine success is the degree to which they've developed their emotional intelligence. And the good news is, while IQ is kind of like baked in at about 18 years old, our emotional intelligence, we can continue to grow and develop that during our entire life. So focusing on emotional intelligent people in our organization will actually give us a more agile organization. And today, agility is a key piece. We've seen what's happened in the world. Things are happening at such a faster pace. So emotional intelligence is an absolute critical skill for emerging leaders, but them also to develop in their organizations so that all members of the team are continually working to develop their emotional intelligence.
That is so true. And, you made a great point there, Kerry, that emotional intelligence is one of a handful of things that you can continue to grow and continue to develop. Your IQ sets at a certain point in your lifetime, and you can read all the books in the world and do all the workshops in the world, and you're probably not going to increase your intelligence quotient, but your emotional intelligence can continue to grow as long as you work at it. And it is so critical in collaboration in a business setting, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kerry, can you tell our audience some of the key things that you teach your emerging leaders about management and leadership?
Well, I've alluded to it already in it, it starts with, mastery of any of these skills isn't that one-time event. Mm-hmm. That it's a constant honing of those skills. And so for emerging leaders, to really invest the time in developing those skills. And that, there's a difference between, there has been in the past a difference between what we call leadership and managing people. I would say, and my focus is that we want everybody, no matter what level they are in an organization, to actually become the CEO of their role that they're playing in the organization. So when I'm working with emerging leaders and working with them to develop their leadership and management skills, it all comes from them going first, them developing those areas. And we use some various scorecards. We use various assessments for them to increase their level of awareness, because one of the key pieces that I've learned in the last 25 years, and Michael, I would assume you've seen it as well, is that clients can come to us, or organizations can come to us to work with some of their leaders, but until they know what's the current status, what the current situation is, they can't make any changes, or they're unable to. So we can only change what we acknowledge.
Sure.
So really that, with the key pieces, they need to actually there needs to be some diagnostic. We need to identify those areas. We need to, and then put a plan in place, obviously, to develop those skills that they have, that they have identified are critical or potentially missing.
I understand. So you encourage your emerging leaders to realize this isn't a one-time event. We're going to keep working at this together, and it's a journey, a little bit of a longer-term project.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah. Well, it's becoming very clear to me, Kerry, that you're a great leader and a great developer of leadership talent. My final question for you, Kerry: over the years, how have you developed strong teamwork and collaboration when you're working with teams?
I realized that a lot of my clients were coming to me with issues that we needed to engage in members of teams versus us trying to kind of fix the team. We needed to have them engaged in it. So I did a lot of work based on the seminal work of Patrick Lencioni, who we mentioned earlier, and his initial seminal book, which was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I partnered with an organization called Wiley. They're the book publishers, and they also, in collaboration with Patrick Lencioni, have created a couple of assessment tools and also a team development program called The 5 Behaviors of a Cohesive Team. And what really the first step in that is to make sure you've got the right people on the bus, because if you're trying to work with a team that has the wrong people on the team, the chances of success are going to be limited as a result of it. So, we really do some analysis on making sure we've got the right people on the bus and the right people on the right seats on the bus, using Jim Collins' analogy there. And then we develop the skills so they can be really a high-performing team. And it starts, if you were to imagine a pyramid, vulnerability-based trust. A team that's going to work really well together has to be able to be vulnerable with each other and be able to say what's true. They have to be able to have conflict. In fact, Lencioni's really fond of saying that an organization or teams that have no conflict are dysfunctional. Now, there's a difference between destructive conflict and productive conflict. I want to be clear on that one.
A big difference.
But this is where conflict's about the issues, not about the people. This is about debating. This is where innovation happens. This is where we can think outside of the box. We can tabletop exercises. We can do all of that. Yeah. And then once we've moved to that phase, then we develop the skill of committing. So even if our idea isn't the one that's going forward, and even if we might not necessarily agree with it, we're willing to put everything behind it. So we don't have sabotage that happens. We don't have people who don't do the work or, don't carry their weight because it wasn't their idea. Because everything sort of builds on it. And then team accountability. I've experienced this, and Michael, you'd probably agree, is that so many leaders today are burdened with trying to hold everyone accountable. And really, it's not their responsibility to do that. It's the team members who have committed to a particular project to hold each other accountable. And then it takes that burden off the leaders to have to be that. So they hold each other accountable, which in the end will get the results that they're looking for. And it's so satisfying to see highly functioning teams. And the bottom line for the organization is, first of all, it helps them attract and retain good talent. Right. Because we know so many good people leave because of toxic work environments or bad managers and bad leaders. They'll have fewer HR issues. And so it's really satisfying work. So that's kind of the framework and the model that I use that works really well with teams.
Well, how fortunate your clients are to work with you on their teamwork. The 5 Behaviors of a Cohesive Team program sounds fabulous. And I have no doubt that it delivers the ability for those companies that work with you on that to develop a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Really fantastic. Kerry, thank you so much for making time to join us for today's conversation about leadership and development. You delivered the goods, my friend. I heard a lot of pearls in your answers today, and I know our C-suite executives and emerging leaders got their money's worth in today's episode. Thank you again. We wish you continued success with your coaching practice and with your Leadership Academy, and we wish the best for you. Well, that's our episode for today, leaders. We want to thank our special guest, Kerry Brown, the CEO and co-founder of Success Biz Coach and Leadership Development Academy in Victoria, British Columbia. Thanks, Kerry. Our next episode will be released, and we promise another intriguing guest who will share their leadership best practices with you. and help to contribute to your greater success. Thank you, listeners, for joining us, and please reach out to us at info@michaelbeachcoach.com and give us some feedback about what you liked about today's episode or about how you feel about our podcast in general. We want to hear from you, and we'd love to have the chance to listen to your feedback about how we can make our podcast even more valuable for you. We'll look forward to spending our next episode together with you. Until then, remember, there is never a better time to start investing in leadership than right now. We'll look forward to having you with us for the next episode of What Are You Doing? See you then.